On Boxing Day, 1920, 53,000 people packed into Goodison Park in Liverpool to watch a football match. The crowd spilled onto the grass and up the terraces and out into the streets, where thousands more stood just to be near it. It was one of the largest crowds ever assembled for a football match on English soil. The team they came to watch was Kerr Ladies. The player they came to watch was a 19-year-old from St. Helens, with a left foot that opponents described as a physical hazard. Her name was Lily Parr. Less than a year later, the Football Association banned women from playing on any ground affiliated with the FA. The ban lasted 50 years. The crowd of 53,000 became a footnote. Lily Parr became a ghost. Welcome back to Medusa Awakened, where we unearthed the voices they tried to bury. She was 16 years old when she joined Kerr Ladies in 1920. She was already something that the people watching her struggled to describe accurately. She had a left foot that could drive the ball into a net from distances that left goalkeepers and crowds with nothing useful to say. She was tall, fast, and possessed of a composure that looked effortless from the outside and was clearly the product of something more like obsession on the inside. The newspapers reached for comparisons and found none adequate. They defaulted to describing her shot as like a man, which was intended as the highest possible compliment in 1920, and which tells you rather more about the era than it tells you about Lily Parr. There is a story, possibly apocryphal and almost certainly true in spirit, of a male goalkeeper who agreed to face her penalty as a demonstration and walked away from the encounter with a broken wrist. She scored nearly 1,000 goals across a career that lasted over 3 decades. That number is not a misprint. By the time she was 19, she was filling stadiums. By the time she was 20, the men who governed football were beginning to pay attention. The historical sources for everything you are hearing are in the pinned comment below. Kerr Ladies had become something nobody in an office building had anticipated. They had started as a factory team during the war, women from a munitions plant in Preston playing matches to raise money for hospitals and veterans. They were good. Then the war ended, the men came back, and the women kept playing. That was the part nobody had prepared for. The crowds that kept turning up were not small or polite or incidental. 53,000 people at Goodison Park on Boxing Day 1920. International matches against French women's teams drawing audiences that rivaled the men's professional league. Charity receipts rising. Newspaper coverage expanding. Something was happening that had not been approved, and it was not slowing down. The attendance figures were going up. The prize money had not been invented yet. Nobody had thought to offer it, because nobody had expected to need it. Lily Parr was the center of it, the player who made people come back, who made people bring their friends, who made women's football feel, not like a novelty or a charitable gesture, but like something they would choose over alternatives. The game was growing around her the way things grow when nobody has yet decided to stop them. A sport was becoming popular. A woman was becoming famous for playing it. Both of those things, as it turned out, were problems. And somewhere in the offices of men who had spent decades building institutions around the idea that football belonged to them, that fact was being noted. Success had made women's football visible. Visibility had made it a problem. The only question was what form the solution would take. The Football Association had been formed in 1863 to govern English football. It had spent 57 years governing it as though women did not exist, which was not an oversight so much as a considered position. In December 1921, it issued a formal statement that ran through several concerns simultaneously. It expressed doubt about the suitability of football for the female body. It cited unnamed medical opinion. It raised questions about charitable fundraising practices. And then, having assembled these justifications, it voted to ban women from playing on any ground under FA jurisdiction. The ban was immediate and total. The stadiums that women's teams had been filling were closed overnight. The matches that had been scheduled were canceled. The crowds that had been growing were told, in effect, that this was no longer available to them. No appeal was possible. No review was offered. The decision was made in a room by people who were never going to be in the crowd at Goodison Park. The damage lasted 50 years. The official language spoke of protection and propriety. The actual effect was to eliminate, in a single administrative decision, a sport that tens of thousands of people had been choosing to watch, and that one woman in particular had been excelling at, beyond any reasonable comparison. The women's game had not done anything wrong. It had done something far more dangerous. It had become too popular, and it had done so in full public view, at exactly the moment when the men who ran football were paying attention. If you believe history remembers institutions while forgetting the women who challenged them, subscribe to Medusa Awakened. The story you're hearing is still happening. Lily Parr kept playing. The ban confined women's football to private grounds outside FA jurisdiction. Smaller venues, smaller crowds, fewer resources, diminished visibility. She played for Kerr Ladies until 1951, across 3 decades in which women's football existed in the gaps between what had been taken and what could be recovered. She scored somewhere around 986 goals, though the precise number, like so much else in women's football history, was not considered sufficiently important to preserve with the care applied to the men's game. She worked as a nurse at Whittingham Hospital in Lancashire and was known there with the same combination of warmth and slight intimidation that had apparently followed her since she was a teenager, with a left foot that nobody wanted to be on the wrong side of. People who knew her in those years described someone who understood exactly what had happened to the game she had helped build, and who had made a private peace with it that did not require her to pretend the injustice was something else. She died in 1978. The ban had been lifted in 1971, not because the FA had reconsidered the injustice of what it had done in 1921, but because the pressure from outside had made the position untenable. Lily Parr was inducted into the National Football Museum Hall of Fame in 2002, the first female inductee. She had been dead for 24 years. The FA ban is not complicated. It is not an accident or a well-meaning mistake that aged badly. It was a deliberate decision made by men who controlled a sport and who responded to the evidence of women's football's popularity, not with accommodation, but with elimination. The justifications they offered were not the reasons. They were the language the reasons required. Institutions that wish to maintain control rarely announce that control is what they are protecting. They announce something else, something that sounds like concern, and then they do what they intended to do from the beginning. Lily Parr played football the way very few people of any era have played it. She played in the spaces that remained after the spaces she deserved were taken away. The stadiums she could have filled were closed. The records that might have been hers were never attempted. The history that could have been written around her career was not written. Because the people who control sports also control which careers become history and which ones become footnotes. History gave her a plaque in 2002. The crowd at Goodison Park in 1920 gave her 53,000 people who came specifically to watch her play. One of those things was what she deserved. The other is what she got. She was too good to be allowed to play, so they stopped her. It took 50 years, and it still wasn't enough.